So we're here to celebrate Dr. Ida Rolf's birthday. Now it's 125 years since she came for the first time in this world, in the form of Ida Rolf, I'd say. And so our celebration was meant to be a little bit different this year, but we succeeded in achieving quite a lot of results despite of the COVID. We will see that we have a book ready, and we have a lot of plans also for next year. So here I am with Neal Powers. I'm reading just in the order I see you. Neal Powers, Aleš Urbanczik, Nilce Silveira, Wayne Hackett, and David Davies. So probably someone else will join us during this call, but in the meanwhile, that's the six of us doing this introduction.
It must be Wednesday.
Aleš, you wanna start straight away with the presentation, or you wanna do something different?
I don't know. It's a party, so we can improvise.
Yeah, that's improvise. I don't have any bubbles with me.
No, I can start. I'm just wondering whether we shouldn't wait unless some people are late or so, but maybe I can just get going. What do you think?
So maybe we can wait. Do you wanna? I know that during this presentation we're gonna talk a lot also about the book. Is this something you want to cover at the end of this, or shall we start with that?
Well,
so my suggestion, given I see the number of people that are connecting right now, so my suggestion would be let's start with this introduction on Ida Rolf life, and
on the life.
Yeah, we know who she was, but I know that you prepare something that's going to be also fun with a lot of pictures. So
I had to do a presentation on Ida Rolf's life for a symposium a couple of weeks ago. That one was about an hour, and I've cut it down to about 15 to 20 minutes with kind of what I thought were the highlights of the presentation.
Okay.
So if you will let me share my screen, I could start. Okay. Is there anything I need to do except?
I think you'd be okay. Let's try now. You should be able to share now.
Yes. Just quickly see. Woo. Okay. Well, I hope this is going to work. Okay. Today, 125 years ago, a little girl was born in New York, Ida Pauline Rolf. I'm going to attempt to retrace parts of her life and her quest to find a balance between humankind and the energy field we all live in, the field of gravity. Ida Rolf's interest in the human physical body originally came from concerns about her own health. As a young woman, she had been struck by a horse's hoof in the chest and had developed symptoms of pneumonia. Since the usual pneumonia treatments did not have any effect, she tried the help of an osteopath who put a very twisted rib back into place, and immediately she could breathe again freely. In her own words, it was unusual to go to an osteopath at that time. There was still a great deal of controversy between the medics and the osteopath, and they were not accepted at all. I got to be friends with my osteopath, and I became interested in the theory of osteopathy, that structure determines function. A contemporary seeker later in life was Moshe Feldenkrais. He and Ida Rolf were friends, rivals in endless discussions about the proper approach. Ida Rolf's structural integration was based on her view of the fascial body being the determining factor, which stood against Feldenkrais's functional integration based on muscles. She came from the stillness of yoga. He came from the movement of judo. They hated and I think loved each other. And on her 80th birthday, Moshe Feldenkrais wrote to Ida Rolf, "Now that I'm writing to you, I would like you to know that I know a few people of your intellectual integrity. I mean, people who created something and do exactly what they say they're doing. You need not do more than what you say, in as much as what you do is already extraordinary. Your teaching is as unique as your insight and your skill. Structural integration and functional integration have more in common than the word that connects them. Indeed, in the case of humans, structure and function are meaningless one without the other, so that when you integrate structure as nobody else can, you improve functioning. The sharpness of your intellect and your indefatigable spirit can age but never grow old. I hope I will be there on your 100th birthday to wish you good health for the future. Your old friend and admirer, Moshe Feldenkrais."
Wow.
People who created something and do exactly what they say they are doing. So what is it exactly that Ida Rolf created? I hope that I will be able to demonstrate that structural integration does not merely constitute another technique, but it is an investigation or an invitation to take up a different point of view, to look at the human body through a different set of glasses. But let's track back a little bit. We are still in New York in 1917 with the world in flames and American soldiers fighting in Europe. The men off to war, the chance for the women to study and work. Ida Rolf graduated from Barnard College in 1916 and then went on to work on a PhD in biological chemistry at Columbia's College of Physicians and Surgeons and in the chemistry department of the Rockefeller Institute. Quote, "I was working in organic chemistry. As a matter of fact, I was working in chemotherapy. And I was one of the workers in a laboratory at the Rockefeller Institute. They were trying to solve the problem of solvism and neosolvism. The American product was proving very toxic. The German product was fine, but the German product was, of course, during the war, no longer available. So part of the research of the Rockefeller Institute as its wartime service was to try and get a better product. But Ida Rolf's interest had always been very diverse. You might call her a Renaissance personality. And once the dust had settled on the battlefields of Europe, Ida Rolf, on a leave of absence from the Rockefeller Institute, went on to study physics in Zurich and homeopathy in Geneva, Switzerland.
Aleš, sorry if I interrupt. Maybe with the paper you touch the microphone. Just
Okay.
Thank you.
How exciting must it have been to study physics in Europe in 1926? The 1920s were certainly one of the most exciting periods in the history of physics, and Europe was the scene of the drama. Auguste Piccard, Werner Heisenberg, Schrödinger, Niels Bohr, Marie Curie, Albert Einstein, and others were hashing out the details of quantum mechanics, creating an entire new physics and changing our understanding of the universe at a rapid pace. Homeopathy and physics. This is how far her interests went. The woman who, according to credible sources, carried a pendulum in her handbag would later say, "All this metaphysics is fine, but be mighty sure you got physics underneath the metaphysics." Back in New York, Ida Rolf, beginning of the 1930s, started practicing yoga, especially tantric yoga with Pierre Bernard. The people who visited his ashram in upstate New York represented a kaleidoscope of who is who upper class prominence of the East Coast. Ida Rolf, In the late 30s, I used to visit weekly a yoga group that worked up in Nyack, New York. It was under Pierre Bernard. Bernard was doing great work because he was bringing in the thoughts which all of us now acknowledge as our present-day philosophies, but which were relatively unknown at that time. Bernard was a tantric-trained yoga teacher. So is there any relationship between the philosophy of Tantra and some of the ideas in structural integration? I don't think there's any doubt about that. So many of our modern ideas are pure and unalterated tantric philosophy translated into contemporary American life. The whole idea that mind and body are one was basically a tantric idea. It did not come from our Western European medicine, not at all. Sam Johnson, a colleague of ours in the United States, concluded that after extensive research that Ida Rolf was balancing within her two paradigms, Hippocrates and Descartes. Hippocrates' idea very originally was to restore balance and let the organism solve a problem on its own. He had seen health as a reflection of balance in the body and illness consequently of imbalance. Internal imbalance caused by living habits, environmental factors, hygiene, etc. led to disease. From that idea followed the belief that if a physician could intervene in such a way that balance was restored in the body, illness could be healed. The 17th century then saw a gigantic paradigm shift. René Descartes published his Discours de la méthode, which laid the foundation for the development of the scientific approach we still know today. This was a crucial change. The scientific method would give scientists a schema for studying nature. It gave reductionism a tool to study the parts systematically. The biochemist and yogini Ida Rolf was fascinated by both. She ultimately chose Hippocrates and in some ways started a bold attempt to bridge the gap between him and Descartes. Structural integration started nearly accidentally. Ida Rolf had made the acquaintance of a lady in New York who had been doing unusually inspiring musical work with children. Ida Rolf wanted this lady to teach her children play the piano. The lady, however, had badly hurt her arms by falling on a hole in the pavement of the New York streets and was unable to play the piano anymore. The tools the medical profession offered had been exhausted. Quote, Ida Rolf. I looked at Ethel and said, I bet I can fix that. Do you trust me to do that? You can't be worse off. I'll make you a bargain. If I can get you to a place where you can teach music, will you teach my children? She said yes. And so I started really with yoga exercises, which I myself was using at that point. After we worked together about 4 times, she was in good enough shape to start teaching music. And that's where structural integration really started, because of course Ethel had a friend who hadn't been able to get help, and this friend had a friend, and so forth. And from then on, my doorstep was pretty much filled with people who hadn't gotten help elsewhere. The next 30 years of her life, Ida Rolf spent working with people and developing the ideas and methods of structural integration before she systematically started teaching. The Esalen Institute, commonly simply called Esalen, a non-profit American retreat center and intentional community in Big Sur, California, focuses on humanistic alternative education. The Institute played a key role in the human potential movement beginning in the 60s. Its innovative use of encounter groups, a focus on the body-mind connection, and their ongoing experimentation in personal awareness introduced many ideas that later became mainstream. It was Fritz Perls, the founder of Gestalt therapy, who called Ida Rolf to Esalen in the mid-60s and offered her the first possibility to train people. Fritz Perls describes Ida Rolf in an interview like this. And Ida Rolf helped you with your heart trouble? This I cannot say. She certainly helped me with the main symptom, those angina pectoris pains that made life so miserable that I was willing to end it all. In this sense, she did save my life. Ida has a holistic outlook. She looks at the whole body and tries to relocate whatever is out of balance. She tears the sheath around the muscles apart to give the muscles breathing space, as she says, and she stimulates atrophied muscles. Well, this tearing apart must be pretty painful, sometimes agonizing. I usually have a cigarette break every 20 minutes. Why doesn't she do this under anesthesia? She claims she needs cooperation. In some places, the muscle tissue is imploded and she works until you let go of the spasm. One day I will be a naughty boy and try and be Rolfed under nitrous oxide. Laughing gas. So, what is the connection with your heart trouble? In angina pectoris, the muscles around your heart and in the left arm become very painful. This is probably nature's way of stopping you from overworking your sick heart. So Ida opened up the cramps in all those muscles and I could breathe freely. I also had sometimes very painful, paralyzing backaches, which have improved about 80 to 90%. Altogether, you see, I have all the reasons to be deeply grateful. What kind of a person is she? A very powerful, big angel. It was here at Esalen that Ida Rolf developed and refined the approach many of us still use today, the Basic 10 series, a systematic program of postural repatterning using connective tissue manipulation and movement education. It was here at Esalen that some clients started experiencing psychological changes. They reported being more self-assured, less troubled by little things, more centered, calmer, or were able to better stand up for themselves. This was, for Ida Rolf, a big surprise. The amazing psychological changes that appeared in individuals that had undergone a process of structural integration were completely unexpected. They inevitably suggest that behavior on any level reflects directly the physical energy level of the initiating physical structure. The psychological effect is far greater than one would expect to induce in the brief encounter of 10 hours of work, which is the normal cycle for structural integration. This effect can be understood as we see it as the emergence of a different behavior pattern resulting from the very much greater competence of physical myofascial organization. Structural integration thus postulates, on the basis of observation, that a human being is basically an energy field operating in the greater energy field of the Earth. Particularly significant is that energy known as the gravitational field. On the basis of observation, Ida Rolf started off with a Hippocratean idea. Create balance within the myofascial web of the human body relative to the energy field in which it moves, the field of gravity. She coined the aphorism, gravity is the therapist. She was way, way, way ahead of her time. In an era when fascia was considered inert filling material, she was bold enough to formulate a radical hypothesis. In her book, Rolfing the Integration of Human Structures, first published in 1974, she called fascia the basic organ of structure. All of this, and I can't emphasize this enough, on the basis of observation. Today, being a fan of semantics, and especially of Korzybski, Ida Rolf chose her words carefully. When she said organ, she meant organ. She could not know that more than half a century later, Professor Carla Stecco would call the facial web the largest sensory organ. Today, we're starting to bring Descartes into the equation. Scientists all over the world have started researching the second body in the body, the three-dimensional network of connective tissue. A lot of the things she claimed on the basis of observation are starting to stand the test of scientific research. Some of them may have a different rationale behind them than Ida Rolf originally thought. But overall, it is surprising how spot on she was. She was torn between two paradigms. She chose Hippocrates and created hypotheses to build a bridge to Descartes. Now it will be up to the next generation to find out why gravity is the therapist. One of the last people to see Ida Rolf was the psychologist and author Murray Korngold. He wrote about his visit. I had never laid eyes on Ida Rolf before that raw March 1979 Sunday morning, when I visited her in a Pennsylvania nursing home. I had come to tape an interview. I had wanted to go directly to the source of the structural integration movement to report the original doctrine rather than someone's paraphrase. She lay ravaged by rectal cancer in an attitude of constant attention. Her sight and hearing were not quick and precise. She was immobile, yet at moments her energy would lick out like a tongue of a flame. Like an old fighter who had the style, but not the wind or legs anymore, she made every move count. I admired Ida Rolf enormously. Aside from the substantive content of Rolfing, the art and science of human verticality, which had taken her name, she had, by dint of her own efforts, unaided, indeed undermined rather than aided. She had promulgated, propagandized, demonstrated, taught, persuaded, organized, irreversibly brought into the world a thing of great importance. And she did all of this without money, without support, while rearing her children and living her life. Murray Korngold asked her the following question. Are you aware that there is more of you than there is in the bed? She answered yes. The following day, March 19th, 1979, Ida Pauline Rolf concluded her mission on this planet.
Thank you, Aleš. That was powerful. Yeah, to see how she was so ahead of her time somehow. For me, I mean, I'm struck by the fact she was doing yoga in the 20s in New York, and she was able to see something that science somehow is bringing to consciousness and to say awareness of the medical world just now in the recent years. You mentioned Calasteco, but also the interstitium was something that is very much connected to what she was able to see and discuss.
Well, she was this Pierre Bernard, who she was studying with, was actually the person that brought yoga to the United States. He was the first. I think even the book is called "The First American Yogi." Now, so it was definitely an influence. And as she said initially, when she worked with the music teacher, she started basically with some yoga exercises, and I guess noticed that connective tissue will stretch or compress relative to what you do, and and then she started probably manipulating the tissue and stretching it actively, and so structural integration, I guess, started that way. I mean, she was bloody bold. I mean, you just have to imagine that. I mean, come on. You just go out there and tell somebody, I bet I can fix that.
Aleš, I'm going to ask you a favor. I mean,
Sure.
Someone talked, they're thinking about the presentation, and someone mentioned like a time capsule. Now we're trying to bring memories like a time capsule. Yeah. So will you help me to introduce our panelists here? And we got people that have met either of. I would like you to introduce.
Sure. I mean, we have, I think the people of the panel that are here that have met either of, I mean, Neal Powers definitely, and I think Wayne also, right? Wayne Hackett. And David Davis, I'm not quite sure.
He met either of.
Well, he met her once, I think, yeah, or twice. But I think Wayne, maybe Wayne is someone that people of the younger generation don't know, but Wayne Hackett was there from the get-go. Is that fair to say, Wayne?
He may be on mute. Is he muted? Wayne, are you there?
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
You were there from the get-go, weren't you?
My internet. Yes, sir. Yes, that was a real blessing in my life. I met Dr. Rolf in 1972 when Emmett, Richard, and I had simply moved into Boulder, and things were very much disorganized in her business world in some ways. And ultimately, she gave Richard a shoebox, literally a shoebox filled with bank receipts, deposit slips, invoices, and said, Richard, will you make me a business? And the school moved into our home in 1973 and was in one of the rooms in our home from 73 until 77 when we moved into the office in Boulder. Yes. So I had many, many wonderful times with Dr. Rolf in our home, there as a dinner guest, times when we would go into the mountains of the Rocky Mountains, and she would put her feet in those cold river waters at 10,000 feet and tell us about coming across the Rocky Mountains in a covered wagon with her father. And wonderful stories. I could talk for days and feel grateful for the wonderful memories that we shared.
Anything that sticks out as a really number one memorable experience?
Well, for me as a young person looking to find my way, I was looking for a path. And one of the things that I to this day remember and deeply appreciate, it was during the 70s, and there was in the United States a political movement called the Equal Rights Amendment, where they were looking about the equality of male and female roles. And they asked Dr. Rolf, said, Dr. Rolf, what do you think about women's rights? What do you think about the ERA? And without hesitation, she looked at them and she said, I wouldn't know. I've always had them. So she said, don't wait for someone to tell you it's all right to be who you are. And that was a very powerful message that really, really touched me deeply. So that's one wonderful message. In those days, she was a bit of a dictator, you know, and she would say to us sometimes, you know, democracy doesn't work. What you need is a benevolent dictator, and you've got one, okay? And so much of our operation in those days was under her guidance in that direction, and she had a clear vision about where she wanted us to go, where she wanted to go. And it was great. Those were great times. I'm remembering my friend Richard. And one of his favorite things was to recall Dr. Rolf having told him, you know, Richard, at least part of the time, remember which way is up. You know, so there were very simple and powerful messages like that colored everyday life for all of us. It was a remarkable time. Times with Peter and Susan in our home, you know, in those early days in Boulder. Or some of you may remember selection process where folks would come as Dr. Rolf sat in her rocking chair. The golfer, and those were very emotionally charged times in our home.
When can you repeat
so many
this,
great memories.
Can you repeat this last verse, this last bit about the selection process, because the break?
Yeah, my here on the island, the internet connection is not real solid right now. We had a process called selection, in which people would present their curriculum vitae and come before Dr. Rolf asking to be trained. And she would sit in a rocking chair and listen to their story and look at their wrists and evaluate their structure. And those days, Neal, David, you probably remember those times, very powerfully charged times in our home. So yeah, selection it was called.
So Wayne, do you think part of the, let's say, dictatorship that you mentioned was due to the fact that you guys were a bunch of disoriented hippies?
Absolutely. Absolutely. She knew that we were all searching, right?
Yeah. At least you were searching.
Oh, there's a message here from Tom Meyer saying, yeah. I left a lot of sweat that went to 100 Abbey Place in my election interview. It was a trip.
Yes.
Just sent a message here.
So, Neal, yes. Can you jump in and tell us a little bit about your experience?
Well, first of all, I'm very touched at this gathering right now. That one of the things Dr. Rolf has done, of course, is to bring us together in this journey of structural integration. And I deeply appreciate, Aleš, your presentation, your research. That was such a well done presentation. It touched my heart many, many times. So thank you very much for that. When I first met Dr. Rolf, it was at Esalen. I'd heard about her. I went down there to study with Fritz Perls. And as soon as I met her, I knew she was a moment of history. And I also knew it was my life's work. And she really did instill in us the importance of being upright. She over and over again would remind us to, as Wayne said, give us, remember just every once in a while how important it is to be upright. And she also enhanced in us to become an observer, to watch, to look at people with soft eyes. And by that I mean you just, as one goes through the selection process, for example, she would, in her rocker, as Wayne described, just observe. She would just observe movement and lack of movement. And I found her history of knowledge just, I was in awe of her. I started observing her and listening to her and taking as many notes as possible. I felt in retrospect very fortunate to have been there. And she still is with me. I still sometimes close my eyes and ask her, what would I do? And she's just a great teacher, even now. It's been 42 years since she passed away. And as an aside, I went to her funeral in New Jersey. And I just sat there and watched the various practitioners come forth and pay their respects quietly or in complete grief. And to this day, I remember looking at her hands as she was lying there, and her hands, I wish I could have put clay around them and made a model of her hands, because her hands were so enormously beautiful. I'm coming from a place of being completely touched by your presentation, Aleš. So I'll add something later on, but right now I have such a deep, almost reverence for our working together and being together. That's what I can say right now. I can go on about things I've learned, but the most important one, again, is the practice of being upright. And to teach that to our clients as an assignment for life, I think is extremely important. And I don't know if a lot of us do that often enough. Our clients leave uplifted often or very centered. And yet I find it important in the essence of integration is to give people a sense of being upright from within. And Dr. Rolf instilled that in all of us. That's me.
Thank you, Neal. Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
so much. David, you were not there before, I think, when we talked for a moment, and I was wondering whether you had met Dr. Rolf as well, and I wasn't quite sure of how much or in what circumstances.
My experience was limited compared to Neal, for example. And by the way, I'm teaching a class right now, so so while I heard my name mentioned, and one of the students said, "Oh, they just called you," so I got back out here anyway. I met Dr. Rolf at the 1976 annual meeting in outside of San Francisco, and she was a deeply mysterious person to me because I hadn't met her, among other things. But her mere presence was imposing, and like Neal said, she's a little bigger than life, and so not that tall, but a huge field. And so she was sitting in a chair, and I don't know, there's probably a couple hundred people walking around and one thing and another. And she pointed her crooked finger at me, and she says, "Young man, come here." So I went over, and she says, "Where are you in your training?" And I told her, which was that I had audited, and she says, "Tell me about yourself," which I did. And she said, and it was like bathing in a light. Her field was so large that, and there was a luminosity about it. And so I just felt like I was drawn into her field, and her profound intelligence, as Neal said, and somebody else said a little bit earlier, something about her powers of observation. And so one knew that one was being observed by an observer. And one of my friends and colleagues, the late Jason Kane, said to me one time, "Well, what made her unique and different is she could see the obvious." So she looked through, she saw through, all of the veneer. And one of the obvious things was gravity. Only the great thinkers think about gravity and our relationship to it. And so anyhow, she she wanted me to be in what turned out to be her last class. Politically, it didn't work out for me, but I also had a bunch of other stuff going on. And then, you know, we would see each other at annual meetings and stuff, which there were only 2 more that she was able to be in with that. And, you know, the last time I saw her, she invited me in for tea and cookies. So very quiet, very peaceful, very beautiful. She was very, very, very warm. And, you know, she liked you, or she, you know, kind of, she didn't not like people, but, you know, she would be hard on people because they needed something to grow that she saw within them that we didn't see in ourselves.
So when Fritz Perls says about her, she was a big, powerful angel, is that something that you can relate to?
Yeah, I resonate with that. I resonate with that completely. I'd like to share a real quick story, if you don't mind.
Sure, sure.
And this is from Peter Melchior. And Peter used to be kind of, he was in a more executive position, shall we say, at Esalen. And so he said that on Friday nights, everybody used to go into Fritz Perls' cabin, and they would talk about the week and kind of set the stage for the forthcoming week. So one Friday night they were having their meeting, and they hear this firm, bold knock on the door. Everybody was there, so who could that be? In walks Dr. Rolf, and she says, "Fritz, I'm here. Lie down." And so she laid him down on the floor, and she started his first hour. And to all visual intents and purposes, it didn't look like it was going too well. Peter said that Fritz was kind of fighting the session and one thing to another, and there's, you know, and Peter said that they were pretty sure they were witnessing his Fritz's second coronary in process, and but she got the session done with him, and he felt better. She wouldn't let him smoke because he was a chain smoker. She wouldn't let him smoke while he was doing the session. So he kept talking though. And so anyway, they finished the session, and then, you know, she left him alone. They finished the meeting. The next day, he was walking down to the baths, and he didn't have to stop to breathe. And then on the way back up the hill from the baths, he only had to stop once instead of like 4 or 5 times to catch his breath. So the first hour did its work and its magic. And I think that's the moment, so to speak, when the Esalen event started to happen. And you know, we're all still here because of those things. That was what opened the door for this work to become more known, more popular, more famous.
Great, thank you.
And just for everybody who's tuning in, right now I'm teaching a class at the University of New Mexico in Taos. It's a basic training. It's been a 10-month training. So the work has a life of its own, and it's come a long way in the last 125 years. And it's such a full piece of or aspect of this life. And you know, I couldn't do anything else. All I can do is get better at this. And because it's a continual learning process, that's what happens every day. It's a rich life. I'll be back. I got to go look at some sessions.
Thank you very much.
Have fun. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
I was wondering, maybe Wayne and Neal would know that. You know, we've been working on this book about Ida Rolf's book and about John Lodge material. And what struck me rereading Ida Rolf's book, Rolfing the Integration of Human Structures, that there is hardly any mention, or actually no mention at all, of the Egyptian art that she was so much I think
Yes.
fast. There's nothing in there. Do you know why? Because, you know, I have a camera case here and there's a sticker of Cairo on it.
Yeah.
You know, so obviously it must have been important to her. She must have traveled to Cairo several times, but the book doesn't mention it at all.
Well, I don't remember her trips to Egypt at all, but I do remember she would share that at a very young age, probably somewhere in her teens, maybe a little later, that she would take the metro from Long Island to the Museum of Natural History and just sit in the Egyptian section, inspired by the right angles, the uprightness of the statues. She also often had a scarab pin or ring. I forget whether it was on her hand or like an amulet on her blouse. And the scarab ring, the scarab beetle represents transformation. I know she had a connection with Egypt. And at that one point when Jan Sultan was having a session from her and he felt this huge weight on his body, he was sweating. He couldn't figure out what it was. I've shared this before, but it had he just had this huge, like he was being crushed. And Dr. Rolf looked up at him, or looked down at him, and said, Egypt. That's all she said, Egypt. And he had this moment of being crushed by a large stone, and it was just momentary, but it had such a aha for him. And also it was that moment of one word to Jan about what he was experiencing, possibly from the past, and how she knew and he became aware of that connection. I'll always remember that. He shared that in the basic class with Dr. Rolf. She sat silent when he described it. She didn't say anything. She had this way of putting her finger next to her lips when she was observing or pondering. I used to love watching that finger on her lips as she would listen to someone recount a story that they'd had with her. I'm sure, Wayne, you must have some memories of her with her Egyptian history. Do you?
Well, what I recall mostly about that was her fascination with the elbow. You mentioned the right angle.
Yeah.
And she was so fascinated with the elbow as a source of power and authority in some ways, and movement from. And so that's what I recall. She didn't share a lot of the Egyptian lore, as it were, but she was really fascinated with their vision of the right angle, and especially how the elbows moved.
Mm. Do you remember the scarab pin or ring?
And that part,
she often had that. She wore it, or
yeah. It's also in the Karsh photograph that you'll see that very prominently, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to piggyback again on what you said, Neal, about the uprightness. You know, that was the first thing I really remember her saying.
Yeah.
When I listened to her speak, she said, uprightness structurally is very connected to moral, ethical uprightness. And she wanted to see how we were going to behave when a group of individuals was living in uprightness. And that was a part of her mystery, her curiosity. Yeah.
Maybe I can just share this, and I don't know if you can all see this. This used to be Dr. Rolf's camera case, okay? And I don't know if you can see this, but there is this one sticker on it where
Yes.
it's Cairo. You know, that's the only, and with some even Arabic writing on it.
Wow.
You know, on the sticker. This is the only one on the case, so she must have been there, you know, probably several times.
Huh.
So,
Aleš, do you have some of the manuscripts of some of the version of the books of either Rolf? It would be nice if you can share the handwritten pages.
Well,
Something, because I mean, Aleš will tell the story, but we have received all this material that came through Margaret from John Lodge, and there are some version of the book that I wrote, and there is a first version that is all handwritten, and what is struck me is most the fact that the first version is almost the structure is already there, completely completely, you know, all the progress is there. Just a little modification. She added another chapter here, another there, but the beginning she had the whole idea how it was supposed and meant to be. And I mean, we spent some time. Aleš is the luckiest one. He spent more time than everyone else with that material, but is like being in the present. When you enter in this room, you are in the presence of not only of her, but of all the work that they all have been doing, like Mary Fatis. It's really amazing, really amazing.
Well, there's not, I mean, I don't know if people are going to see this, but this is, for instance, part of...
we can see it.
You can see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is one of the, let's say, first versions of one of the chapters in the book, which starts with pain. And there is, well, essentially, there's the whole book is in handwritten version here. So it's a lot. It's really a lot. Maybe a little detail. I mean, I always have a feeling this was more of a joke that kept her going, but the first title of her book for herself, the working title.
No, it's
too small.
It's the recreation.
The recreation of Adam and Eve.
Oh. Oh.
Of course, that working title was afterwards changed several times, but this was the first one, and I think it was something that, if you look at the whole scope of how much work was involved by all people involved, and it took 4 or 5 years, you know, until it was finished. It was, I think, something that for herself was more like an internal joke that kept her going and that kept her, you know, working on it and continuing to work on it, rather than the hybris, you might say, of wanting to really play God or something like that. Yeah. That's at least the sense I get from reading through all the material and all that. So, but she did say the gospel according to Rolf sometimes, didn't she?
Yep, yep.
So
I'd like to ask Nilce. Nilce, you've worked with, you of course worked a lot with Emmett, who was so close to Dr. Rolf. Do you have thoughts and memories of both working with Emmett and hearing about the stories with Dr. Rolf? There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember I heard so many stories. I spent so much time with Emmett, and he was always talking about the way he taught was talking about stories of Dr. Rolf. So that was my inspiration. I remember all those stories very lovingly, and it has been a great time. I never met her, but I feel as if I had, because of all that I heard from her, about her, from Emmett and Richard and Wayne and that house, and when we lived there. It was great time, great time.
What are one of the stories that you particularly remember?
I don't, I wouldn't know which one to choose right now. If I think of it as we keep talking, I will share.
Nilce, do you remember the story that Emmett used to say about when the first time he met Ida Rolf? Do you remember that one?
That he went to the hotel, that one, that he arrived and Dr. Rolf is there with some other people. He was interested in Rolfing, and he went to meet, Wayne can help with that story. He went to meet and talk to Dr. Rolf, and he gets in the hotel room and they are there. I think it was Valerie Hunt that was there with her, and she was working on somebody, and this Valerie had her hands away from the body that was being touched and saying, oh yes, more here, more there, yes, you're there. And so that was his first.
Pendulum as well.
He arrived there. Dorothy Nolt says somebody here was working. I don't remember who it was. One of those people. And Dr. Rolf was working, and when he entered there, all he knew is he had found something different. It was
Okay.
Ah, David is back. How nice.
Class finished. You're muted. Wayne, what I would like to know if you received word from Ida Rolf, if you had the chance of receiving word from her, and how was it?
No, you know, the truth is, I had a very different relationship with Dr. Rolf. I never received her work. She was surrounded by folks who admired her, loved her, wanted her to teach and share. And I had the gift of being someone that would take her to the Dairy Queen when she wanted a hot fudge sundae. I had the gift of, she wasn't going to be teaching me about her work. And so we got to share stories about Ida, the young fun thing.
Now, when you're breaking,
for things I enjoyed. Fried steak and mashed potatoes and gravy, that sort of thing. Those were fun moments that we shared.
Was that her favorite food?
Well, it was when she came to Abbey Place.
Oh.
and she always requested the same thing. She wanted some chicken fried steak, mashed potatoes, gravy. She wanted her broccoli steamed, but not too cooked, overcooked. And she wanted a custard for dessert. And that was something that she made well known in advance. And, you know, I'm also reminded, Neal, and some of us that may know, was a very important piece in those early days. And Dr. Rolf had the ability of helping us to feel like we were grateful for being able to help her, to serve her, to be around her was something. It was an amazing sense of how blessed we were to be in her presence. And it wasn't done out of arrogance. It was an amazing. Neal, can you speak to that what she instilled in us?
Well, she included us. She had the gift of not dismissing us, although there were times I felt somewhat dismissed. No, she had an inclusive way, and she was such a great storyteller. I mean, the ability to teach a lesson as a story was just amazing. She could start talking about Korzybski. She could start talking about Egypt. She could start talking about a moment in an elevator. And it would be another lesson about observing a body and working with the body. And I just found her fascinating. And I didn't have those private meetings. I remember there was that one meeting, I can't even remember if Ida was there, maybe in spirit, when Bella was there at Abbey Place. And that's another thing that fascinated me, was Dr. Rolf's willingness to include psychics like Byron Gentry, like Wayne and Bella. And I found that very important in my life, to start to not just observe people, but to include other entities, other energies. And I remember several times when Dr. Rolf would call Byron Gentry and say, I've got this student. Well, this was the story. She would say, I've got this student and he's not really, or she's not really attentive enough, or what do I do? And he would put the phone down and he'd measure his hands and he'd say, this person's got some entities attached to them. I'll see what I can do. And in no time at all, there was often a shift of that person through Ida's willingness to tap into Byron Gentry or Wayne and Bella. And I found that area of her, she didn't hide it. She talked about it, but she didn't talk about it in public. It was not her goal was to get Rolfing scientifically approved. All her energy work in class, she didn't talk about outside of class. And, but that part of her, that way of bringing in other energies, I think inspired a lot of us to be attentive, not just to the present, but to the other energies outside the present that are maybe affecting the present. She was a trip. She was a trip. One of my favorite moments is she's sitting in her rocker and she's watching us, observing us, and she'd say something like, David, it's under your third finger. And of course, David's hand was underneath the person, but that whole thing. And sometimes I see, I've heard of a teacher doing that, and I go, oh no, don't do that. Don't do the Ida Rolf under your third finger thing. Just teach what you know. There's a tendency for all of us, I guess, to imitate. And I think what's most important is for us to be ourselves when we teach, or even privately as practitioners. She was a genuine force. She really was. And I still think of her fondly. I don't know if that helped at all. I kind of segued off into the third finger.
So do you guys think that she would be happy on how her work has evolved and the current state of structural integration generally, but also, I mean, let's say the approach to the human being that have been evolved from that time to now? What would you think she would say now?
What do you think, Dario?
I don't know. I mean, from my perspective, but I didn't meet her. From my perspective, I mean, I was in Berlin from the Fascia Congress, and there was this kind of merge between West and Eastern culture and science meeting together to build a man. No? It's like what she was telling there starts now to become, I'm not saying mainstream, but it's starting to become more accepted, and there are some bases in the science of what she was seeing there. So somehow I think she would be happy, but I mean, I don't have her vision, and so maybe we are not yet in the right direction. That's why I'm asking you.
Well, I think one element which I think she might be happy about is that in Italy, Carla Stecco started off with fascia, but she started off with deep fascia. And now, after some years of dissecting things and forming a human atlas of fascia and of deep fascia, she is suddenly starting to research the importance of the superficial fascial layer. You know, not of deep fascia, of the superficial fascial layer. And I think, if I remember, at least from Emmett's teaching, this was something that was important to Dr. Rolf, that you should not just go deep, but you should start really with that surface, and that the surface work would transform the deep layers too. And now that, you know, if this is being researched, I think she would be happy about that.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
I think she'd be very happy with the work today, and that Dr. Rolf had what I think it was Martha Graham who stated the divine dissatisfaction. She had an appreciation for what is, but she was always mindful that there was something more. And so that divine dissatisfaction was kind of a part of her that I believe she'd be really happy with what's happened today.
I'd just like to add
and saying, and now what?
I think she would be very happy with what the European Guild is doing in Europe, bringing her work sincerely to the population. And I think she would be very pleased to see the European Guild working.
I think so.
At the 1977 annual meeting, she sat up in front of the group of everybody sitting on their line with their superficial fascia still rigid. She was looking, we were all doing our best to be online, but it was, it was an extrinsic event. And because we all wanted to be right for her. And so, or shall we say, not come under the harsher side of her gaze. But she was sitting up front and she was looking at this legal pad of paper, and she had her glasses on and a large magnifying glass, and everybody's waiting with bated breath, what's she gonna say? And she said, that's another thing. I've started an experiment and you're it. And we're still it. And from what Aleš was just saying and everything else, the class I'm teaching right now, the work continues to grow. It has a life of its own. And she initiated us in a practice that she didn't entirely tell us, oh, this is a, practice of human potential and spiritual growth. Like Neal was saying, she didn't talk about energy work or psychic stuff in class, and especially not in public. And here down the road, all these years later, the work continues to expand. It has a life of its own, and we don't even know all of the lives that it's touching.
Good points. Good points.
And at different times in her conversation, she would talk about the three aspects of our human nature, our spiritual nature, our feeling nature, our mental, our psychological, and then our physical being. And there are times that she would talk about having three different schools even that would look at those three aspects of the human condition. And so she was always ever the scientist, the educator, and she was curious. She was very, very curious about all aspects of our human condition.
To do that impossible thing.
So, guys, what do you think if we show the present that we have prepared for either Rolf?
Oh, yes.
Aleš, would you like to?
I don't know what the present is.
Come on, we've been working on that since 1 year ago. You know.
Well, I could show it live. How about me showing it live?
Yeah, show it live. In the meanwhile, I'm showing the. Oh, here it is.
Here it is. Here it is. Okay. This is a year's work.
Yay!
I think it turned out quite nice. It's a very nice book about all the John Lodge material, and with pictures about John Lodge, but with stories. So there's things in there for I think for everyone.
Excellent.
It's basically for sale now. The one thing that I had an idea that for the Americans, because it is tedious, of course, to send each individual one to the United States, if there was somebody in the United States who would be willing to receive a box of like 20 or 30 and then just bring them to the post office so that, you know, it wouldn't be so one-on-one, then maybe you could just send us an email if you'd be willing to do some community support volunteer work. It would just be going to the post office once or twice a week. That's all it would be.
We already have one volunteer, so drop us an email, Elizabeth, please, and we'll contact you.
Okay, great.
If there are other, let us know. Okay, I'm just sending my email to you. Okay, that's it. I thought you were going to show more about the book.
What?
Show us some pages.
I'm not sure what.
Open it.
Okay, I'll open it. I'll open it.
Open it.
I'll open it.
Just,
I'll open it.
oh, look at it.
Beautiful.
Okay, so we haven't mentioned it, but clearly we have received also some of the John Lodge pictures are those that are also in the book, but some are not. So we have also, these are the handwritten of the book itself. There's some John Lodge drawings that are not in the book. We have some of these teaching notes in the class. I mean, it's I think you'll enjoy it. I've enjoyed it very much. And we also have some t-shirts if you want.
Well, I think what this book is really about, what struck all of us when we had a look at these handwritten notes and the typewritten notes and compared them to the book later that was actually published, was that some little parts have been left out in the published version then. And all of these were parts which related to this, let's say, metaphysical or spiritual aspect that seems to have been part of Ida Rolf's identity, her interest, her life, but which maybe she deemed not to be able to put in a book where she wanted to attract a broader population. Okay? So this is the sense that we got. And in some ways, what we try to do is to put those elements back in so that the picture of Ida Rolf becomes a little bit more complete. That's, I think that, is that fair to say, David, that this was a little bit our,
Yeah, absolutely.
a line of inquiry.
A line of inquiry. And John opened up a lot of material that previously, like Neal was saying, she didn't talk about those things in public or anything else. And I'm reminded of a story about John that Susan Melchior told me, and very briefly is that he was teaching a class at the Rolf Institute, and on the first day of class he walked in buck naked and said, "I just want you to know I have nothing to hide from you." So that's how he started the first day of one of his basic trainings. So John was a card.
Well, somebody, I think,
That was his very first class. That was his very first class, in fact, David.
Oh, okay.
Somebody in the chat is asking who this John person was. So he was a practitioner, but he was also the illustrator who drew all the illustrations in Dr. Rolf's book. And she must have, I think, from what people tell me, she must have been very, very hard on him on that, because he would have to draw and redraw them again until it was exactly the way she wanted to have it. He must have been of an incredible patience with her. Because I have all of these 250 or so drawings here. And I mean, this is the 1970s, all of them. I don't know if you can see this for the printing of the book. They have these little stickers on them, you know, which nowadays you would do on a computer, but they're all just pasted onto it for the printing. And it just speaks to the incredible amount of work that that was involved in all of this without the use of technical methods at all.
No, it's all done. All the book is what we call the menabos. So the making of the book was done manually, sticking one next to the other, and it's amazing. So a couple of questions. First of all, we have Bert here with us. Bert Smith just arrived. And Aleš, they're asking if we can send to Japan also the book.
If we can do what?
To send the book to Japan.
Sure. We have worldwide shipping for the same price.
Yeah, so you just have to go to the website, which is rolfguild.eu, and from that page you'll see the link to the buying, to the purchasing.
By the way, even in Japan, if there's like 10 people there, I mean, do a bulk order, you know, instead of sending an individual one. If there's a group of practitioners there that want to get together, we can find a way of doing that.
Good.
Way easier than sending each individual one.
Okay.
Hi, Bert.
Hi, Neal. Amazing. I finished my day and you started, huh?
Yeah.
So, Bert, we were talking about Ida Rolf. Did you actually ever meet her?
I met her not personally, but it was a presentation. And I don't know if it was in Monterey or in San Francisco, I don't know, the 70s, beginning 70s.
And what was your impression at the time? Because everybody's been kind of sharing their first impression of Ida Rolf.
Oh, I didn't know anything about body, mind, and I just finished as a psychologist, academic, and so I was curious and open for everything, and so I was mostly accompanied by friends who suggested that this lady was amazing and Rolfing, and then afterwards I had the Rolfing on my own structure. So it was a period that I was quite impressed with anything happening there at that time.
Great, thank you.
Sure, and you know, it was like Hector Prestera, you know, he Rolfed me, and afterwards I had acupuncture and Trungpa Rinpoche was there, and so I was just blown away from this planet, at least my mind, my brain. So it was, for me, it was like an incredible period. And so, and I guess I decided somewhere in the beginning 80s that maybe I wanted to study Rolfing. But that still was in the effect of it after years and years. I thought, this is an amazing thing. Now I want to go into it. And so it was, I think, 82 that I then finished the first European training. The first Michael Salverson in France, and then with Peter Melchior in München.
Wow.
And so all the stories of Ida Rolf, you know, was just coming in. Wonderful.
So what do you think, guys?
Huh?
Well, I want to add one thing. I want to add, I don't know whether Judith Aston is on the panel or wherever she is, but I want to thank her contribution to Dr. Rolf's work with all the movement education that has become quite viable in our work. So Judith, wherever you are, and movement teachers, wherever you are, thank you for your contribution.
Well said, Neal. Thank you. Mary Bond, if she's here, of course, also.
I've invited Judith. I don't know if she's joining, but Mary Bond was still here. Mary, if you want to join, I can add you to the call, and if you wish to.
Hello.
Judith.
Oh, hello. Hello.
Hi, Judith.
I had
Oh.
thank you so much, Neal. I've just been so touched by all of this, and I had the opportunity to be with Dr. Rolf regularly for almost 10 years. I started with her in spring of '68. I have all kinds of stories, of course, that I was just writing down. I should try to write these up for you guys to have, of certain wonderful things that happened. But I just wanted to say, Dr. Rolf, I remember wearing a scarab, and that made her particularly interested in my finger and whatever was going on with me. But she had this depth and breadth and wealth of interest and knowledge and ability to be in the sciences, the chemistry, the physiology, the biology, into the esoteric, into the practical, into stocks and bonds, into whatever. I mean, one of the humorous moments was in 1968, I think. A friend and I took Dr. Rolf to dinner in LA, and my friend was a stockbroker, and I hear him clear his throat. Ida's on this side of me, and he's on this side of me. He says, Dr. Rolf, Judith tells me you play the stock market. And she's cutting her meat, and she said, no, I do not play the stock market. I invest in commodities. I thought he was going to choke on his food. But anyway, the point is that the girl could do it all. And it was so impressive. So literally, if the client came in and their specialization was something, she would know something about that. I don't know what you call, what the term would be for her.
Encyclopedical.
It's just incredible. So it's been such a pleasure to listen to you. And Aleš, I hope that we can reread what you wrote, that you were reading to us about the history and all. That was so touching. And thank you, Neal. Yes, Dr. Rolf asked me to create. I had a car accident, and I went to her, and in my first session, because I had to sit on her doorstep at Esalen for 2 days, waiting for a cancellation, and she must have inquired who this strange person was. And so I did the session with her, and immediately I could feel the magic and the miracle of what was happening, that I was going to be able to move well again, and so on. And at the end of the session, she said, I understand you design movement programs for people and their systems. And I said, yes, I do. And she said, would you create one for me for structural integration? And so I did that, and I finally started teaching that in 1971. So thank you for asking, and I'm just enjoying this so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So nice to see you, Judith. Oh. Mm. Mm.
I don't know if you can hear me,
Yes.
but now I'm just about to celebrate my 80th birthday.
Happy birthday.
And I said that to somebody the other day. Oh, Don Johnson. And he said, oh, no, I always think of you as 50. I said, thank you. But anyway, so I just remember our 80th birthday celebration with Dr. Rolf.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, that was great.
Tell us something about that celebration. Where was it?
San Francisco
My
Yacht
goodness,
Club.
it was at the Yacht Club in San Francisco
Marina.
on the Bay. I think I'll probably have a few friends on Zoom. I think it's quite different. But Dr. Rolf, it was an incredible meeting. I remember Moshe was there, Mia Siegel came with him. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. I enjoy so much being here. Just even I don't have to say anything, but I like this presence. I like this connection. I like to see your face. And Judith, I'm so happy to have you here. Also, Mary is here with us. I see that there is Margaret on between the people, among the people that is listening. So Margaret, if you want to join in, please let me know. Just type, write a message for me, okay?
Well, in the interim, I'd like to add another insight Dr. Rolf instilled in us, and that is the concept of sleeve and core, the doing and the being. And I find that that continues, as David says, to be a learning process. I know that the integration of the human body has a lot to do, as Emmett used to say, coming from the core. Action and movement initiates from the core. And for a doer like me, that was quite an obstacle and continues to be a bit of a challenge. And yet I know inherently that the integration of the body must include the core movement, core awareness even. And that was a big lesson that I continue to learn from Dr. Rolf, was living in my core. And what I find somewhat challenging is when certain modalities came in and they wanted to strengthen the core. And that wasn't the being core that Dr. Rolf was talking about. It kind of made the being core a doing core, where you have too much core strength. I think core awareness is what I'm looking for. And it is a strength, but it's not a contracted strength. And I'm still learning about this and developing it in my own body and my practice. But from those early days of Dr. Rolf talking about core and sleeve, I think planted in me the idea of having a core. And I have a great in my, I don't even know if it was an auditing class. I think it was a model in Dr. Rolf's class. And I'm standing there and Judith walks by and goes, "He has no core," or something like that. And I went, "Oh." And Peter walks by and says, "He can mock it up well." And I thought, wow. But it was both Judith's pointing and Peter's forgiveness that allowed me to, what are they talking about? To start to investigate this idea of having a Neal within the Neal, having a being Neal inside the doing Neal. And it was a profound moment for me with Judith walking by saying he has no core, or something like that. And Peter putting a Band-Aid on that moment. I still think of that. And I enjoy it. I find, I don't mind being humbled. And I think part of this work is humbling. Part of this work in doing it is humbling, that it's a mystery and we have to continue to accept that it's a mystery and enjoy the journey. That's my thought right there. I don't know if Judith remembers that moment, but Neal remembers it.
I think that's really a significant piece that you touch on there, Neal, about the effortless reality that was a part of the journey. That she was always, although it was a time of so much doing and so much curiosity and looking and investigating and trying this and that, there was also an awareness and acknowledgement of that effortless reality that's within each of us. And that's what she wanted to also help us to manifest.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So we have Margaret with
Good.
Margaret, it's nice to see you again. It's we met in 2011, I think, in Kauai. You were doing the practicing, I was doing the auditing, and then we exchanged some trips and some emails, and your wonderful gift to the guild, European Guild. Would you like to unmute yourself and Aleš? Okay.
There. No,
No? Yes?
not yet. There.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, there she
Can you
is.
hear me?
There's Margaret.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So Margaret, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
So have you already received the book, or are you going to?
I have not. I have not received it. I'm very excited. Very excited. It's just amazing to me that you guys did this. It's, I wanted the material from John to be archived, but I had no idea that this would happen. So I've been in a good mood for months.
Your book is going to be shipped on Friday,
Oh, good.
and it'll take probably about 2 weeks or so to get there, at least.
Okay, I'm sure.
Okay.
But, John, I say it over and over, he would just be over the moon about this. He would just be absolutely thrilled that this is happening. And, that this work has found a home. All the material that I had, it's found a home, is I guess how I should say it. And I waited many years to find that home. And I know I found the right home.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Ooh.
And Mary
So
Bond.
I want to say thank you so much for what you've done.
Oh, Margaret, it was the moment it arrived. I mean, all of us knew that this was an assignment and not some gift or something. It was a gift, of course, but it was a gift with a clear message. Do something with this.
Yes. Yes, I had the original version of the book, which is originally I think all I was going to send you, and then I was putting it together to ship, and I just the voice in my head said no. Everything I had that was original, every single thing was going to go, and that's what I did. It's a huge box, as you know.
Yes.
And I
I'm
think
still
probably we haven't finished yet to work with
I'm
this
sure.
portfolio.
Yeah, but John, he always wanted to be acknowledged for what he'd done, and he is being acknowledged now.
Yeah.
Because he worked so hard on those drawings.
I'm still kind of contemplating, and I've run into some opposition on this by others thinking that it's too dangerous to create a traveling exhibition to go to the different schools. But I haven't given up on the idea yet, so it's still.
Oh, that's another great idea. Yeah, I think when I'd met him at the party at his house, she saw his artwork, and I'm sure that was part of her bringing him in. I mean, he had these great hands, she said, but she saw the shaman, she saw the intuitive man in his art, and I think she wanted something infused in her drawings, maybe of that somehow. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure that was part of the whole thing with her kind of, picking him out.
So,
Welcome, Mary.
we got. Well,
I can
thank
see
you,
you.
Margaret. We got Mary Bond here.
Good.
Mary, hi.
Hi, everybody. This is so beautiful, Aleš, what you've put
Wonderful.
together, you and the team, this book. It seems like it's coming at a really good time. So I'm grateful to hear about it. And today also, it's lovely to just sit with everybody who, so many people knew her, including me. I didn't know her very well, but she gave people assignments, you know, as somebody just said, this book was an assignment for you. And she said to me that I was the little school teacher. So I feel like that's kind of what happened to me, and I can't seem to stop, you know. It's like she's still there going, no, you can do more, you can do more. So I no longer am associated with the Rolf Institute, but I teach my own classes online. And my reach is really more to share the message of gravity with other somatic practitioners, not just Rolfers, not just structural integrators, but people who do beautiful work with somatic awareness, you know, Tai Chi and Pilates and yoga and all kinds of other mixed versions of working with people and bodies. But they don't really get it about gravity. You know, nobody has taught them that one simple thing that Ida taught all of us. So that's what continues to interest me and keep me going. And I don't have really any interesting stories from when Dr. Rolf was alive, but I can tell you an experience I had, maybe it was 5 years ago. I was in Arizona taking a class with Jeff Maitland. Some of you may know him as a former senior practitioner for the Rolf Institute. Lovely man, and he is no longer able to work hands-on because of his physical situation, but he has a strong energetic ability. So he was teaching us. It was a class in working off the body, basically. And so at this point, I was on the table, you know, because we were sharing explorations in this class, and I was on the table, and I just suddenly burst out laughing because I saw her and she was laughing. You know, she was pleased with us that this was where we were going, and that she was still with us. So it was very, I don't know, it was very unexpected for me because I haven't had that kind of connection with her. So that's really all I have to share, except thank you, Dario and Aleš and everyone for putting this together.
Thank you. Neal, there's a message from you from Dan Summers saying, I don't know if you read it. Bravo, Neal, remembering our Sausalito days in 1990.
Yes, I read it. Thank you very much.
That's what you think. It's time to wrap up, or shall we stay a few moments? What do you want to do?
Well, I feel quiet and I feel complete. And again, thank you for orchestrating this from all of us.
Yes, I feel the same quiet place. It's really nice. And I want to say thank you to the European Guild for continuing this incredible journey with all of us. It's we're heirs to an incredible legacy, and I'm grateful for sharing it with everyone.
Yeah.
Dario, can I use the quietness just for a moment and tell people a little bit more about what we're going to do next year?
Yeah.
Just briefly, maybe you can show the slide for the conference next year for the symposium.
Give me a second. Yeah, I will.
This is just more an infomercial now.
Yes. Is it visible? So.
Well, the advanced training is full, so.
Okay.
But after that, next year in Prague, we're going to have a 6-day symposium related to teaching and understanding and deepening our understanding of the basic series, with all of the panelists that you've seen here today. Everybody's going to be teaching a workshop, several workshops, 6-day event in Prague, May 31st to June 5th, 2022. And then in the following year, we will for the first time attempt in Europe to do a, this is just the,
Sorry,
the next one.
you want me to change the
I
slide?
just wanted to point out that we're going to have an international basic training in Europe in 2 modules. Come back a little bit.
Yeah, sorry.
We usually have we have a training program which lasts 2 years usually, and is in 20 modules. But we'll devise a new program for 2023, an international one taught in English. Nilce Silveira is going to teach it. And we welcome people from all over the world for this. Usually we teach in the local language. So when we teach in Poland, we teach in Polish. In Italy, it's in Italian. But this one will be taught, we don't know where, maybe it'll be in Milan, but it'll be taught in English, and Nilce is going to teach it in 2023. That's all from my end as a school director. And now we can get quiet again.
Thank you all, guys. I'm going to end the communication.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy birthday, Ida Rolf.
Happy birthday, Ida.
Happy birthday, Dr. Rolf.
Ciao.
Birthday.